We are the school community partnership, but we are a subcommittee of partners for a healthier community. And we like to make that known because they are generous enough to give us a stipend to have these trainings and to bring resources to you guys.
It's great to be here, folks. I really thank you for the opportunity to come and share with you. I want somebody to time me because I'm giving myself 15 minutes and that's it. Because I really wanted to turn this over to Kim and really let her talk about her work, about what she's seeing in detox and stabilization, and really about some of the issues or barriers that may exist to getting treatment for kids in need treatment. Okay, so if somebody out there, just somebody raise their hand if I've talked longer than 15 minutes, because I'll stop at that moment. So I apologize to people who've seen this before. Any idea what we're looking at? What are we seeing here? Any guesses?
Brain activity?
That's right. It's you're right about the fact that it's brain. It's really cross sections of the neocortex of a couple of groups of monkeys, of primates. The first group, well, there's actually two groups involved. The first group is a control group, which was given saline. The second group, the experimental group, was given MDMA or ecstasy for 4 days, twice a day. So twice a day for 4 days, and then they stopped. All right? So what you're seeing here, that purple spaghetti-like stuff, is the neurotransmitter serotonin. Okay, they use dyes and stuff to bring out the presence of serotonin in that slice of brain tissue. So the first group there is a control group. That's the group that didn't get any MDMA or ecstasy. So after the 4 days, they stopped giving the experimental group ecstasy, and 2 weeks after that, that's the serotonin level that you see. So it's approximately 10% of what it was in the control group. The third slide is this experimental group sometime later. Any ideas how long? You can see it's about 50% recovery.
A year?
Guesses?
Yeah, I'd say a year.
Guesses? 7 years.
Oh my God.
So after 7 years, what we found is that the serotonin levels still have not recovered to the point that they would be in a normal primate. The point of all this is not that we are like monkeys, because we're obviously, there are some differences, and not necessarily that this could be replicated in humans, but the fact is that substance use changes brain chemistry. And that's really the point. And particularly in adolescents, as we'll find. Okay? So when we're talking about adolescent substance use, or substance use in general, we're talking about a continuum that goes from experimental use, where there aren't necessarily adverse consequences. If you're talking about adolescence, you're talking about something that deviates from social norms or social values. But one thing to remember about adolescent experimentation is that all addicts pass through this stage. So we can't tell at the stage of experimentation whether somebody is going to develop a full-blown addiction or not. But as we move along this continuum, what we find is that there is a gradual loss of control over this drug-taking behavior. The second thing we find is this development of tolerance. People know somebody describe what tolerance is.
You get used to it. It doesn't do the same thing anymore for you.
That's right. So you need more to do the same thing. So tolerance is a physiological reaction to the fact that substances change neurobiology. You find as you get along this continuum more and more time spent in drug-seeking behavior. There's a decrease in social or recreational activities, things that kids were involved in that were really a part of their life and important in terms of their connections to the community start to decrease. They start hanging around with kids who use. And so that process of using and hanging around with kids who use, using alone, gradually becomes more and more prevalent. Finally, at the far end of the continuum, you have this situation where it is really completely taken over. What happens neurobiologically is that the midbrain, the reward incentive system, really takes control. And the cortex which controls executive functioning, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which serves the function of saying, no, that's enough, stop, that's not such a great idea, let's not do that. That part of the brain starts to devolve. So what you have is you have a situation where that starts to lose its ability to control behavior, and the midbrain, or the limbic system, becomes the part of the brain that really has the most salience, has the most voice. And in neurobiology, it's all about use it or lose it. So whatever is not being used, loses its ability over time to really make a difference. So in the end, this is why people end up using, in the face of financial difficulties, relationship difficulties, difficulties with school or jobs, and difficulties with the legal system. So here's the key thing. If you get nothing else out of this, this is the key. Adolescents are not little adults. All right, they are different. They're different physiologically, neurobiologically, and emotionally. So one of the things we've discovered in recent years is, surprise, surprise, adolescents' brains are not fully developed. So there is this white matter, this connective tissue that really connects all different parts of the brain. That's not fully developed until the mid-20s, sometime between 24 and 26 is our best estimate at this point. So for the purposes of our discussion, the key piece of it is that the connections between the cortex, particularly the prefrontal cortex, and the midbrain or the limbic system are just not there. So that we have a situation where the limbic system is hypersensitive. So adolescents are hypersensitive to rewards and incentives that drive them to behavior that is thrill-seeking or pleasurable or provides an antidote to boredom. So on the one hand, you have this hypersensitive midbrain. On the other hand, you have a cortex that's not fully operational. So it's a recipe for disaster. What this means is that physical changes to the brain for adolescents are more long-lasting. It means that adolescents are more prone to addiction. It means that adolescents, as we know, don't seek treatment voluntarily. Most kids don't come up and say, I'm smoking a little too much weed, I think I need to go into treatment. It doesn't happen that often. And finally, only 1 in 10 adolescents who meets the criteria for substance use disorder and needs treatment actually receives it. So the other piece that Kim is going to talk a little bit about, hopefully, is that in the system in which she works, somewhere up to 80% of the kids have co-occurring disorders, either trauma history or a mental disorder that makes it really difficult for them to kind of navigate life. You put substances and substance use on top of that, and you have a real serious and much more intractable problem. So statistically, the chances are 1 in 25 that you'll develop a substance use disorder if you start using substances at age 21 or greater. If you start using before age 18, the chances are 1 in 4. And if you look at a bell curve of substance use, what you see is that the age where it starts is early adolescence. Substance use for the entire population peaks really somewhere between 18 and 22, and then starts to decline after that. So the kids that you're dealing with are the crucial age for a variety of issues, particularly substance use and its lifelong effects. Okay? And I'm going to turn this over to Kim now. So to talk about the kind of youth that she sees who are in treatment and presenting for treatment in detox and stabilization programs and elsewhere.
Do these follow the slides?
Pretty much.
Okay.
But you can feel free to just improvise as you want.
Hopefully I have enough. I have some brochures and then kind of like a FAQ type sheet to pass around. So I'm from Castle, which is in Brockton, but the Greater Agency is Hetzler Treatment Center, and we offer a ton of stuff. I'll get there. But the kids that we have kind of system-wide. So this is the 2-year stabilizations, which kind of do detox and clinical stabilization, all the way through the residentials, through outpatient programs that are DPH funded. These are really true of all the kids we're seeing. So, how do you move it over?
Yeah, you just go.
I'm not stupid.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So marijuana is the primary drug of choice in our system. That doesn't mean that that's primarily what they're using. Most are polysubstance users. So it's kind of that like very impulsive brain with adolescents. If it's here, I'll take it kind of feel. I think that we're much higher on the 80 to 85% on the co-occurring disorders. And system-wide, at least a third, if not more, of our kids are DCF involved somehow, be that CRA, custody, temporary custody, something like that. And for DYS, we don't have a ton in stabilization. Usually what ends up happening is they end up in lockup for whatever reason, at least for like the 14 days or whatever else. You can see the percentage is higher for the residential system. Okay. So for trauma histories in our types of treatment programs, you know, it's exactly what you would think, the normal kind of abuse and neglect and whatever else, but it's a little bit more specific as well. Lots of intergenerational substance abuse. I don't think that surprises anybody in this room. Some parents who are actively using, some parents who have been clean for quite some time, but there was just a lot of early childhood trauma, people in and out of the house, sexual assaults, things like that early on. Many kids who have used with their parents, including heroin. 2 years ago, we had a 13-year-old kid admitted to us, IV heroin addict, and for Christmas, his mother had bought him like the full works to shoot heroin. And he was with his mother on a regular basis. Lots and lots of like rapes the day before admission for males and females for that, or females and males for that matter. And obviously a lot of violence witnessed or experienced. So Mike works for IHR. This is the Central Intake and Care Coordination. So if you're looking for sort of general services, trying to figure out what your kid needs and kind of what level of care or whatever else makes sense for them, that's the number to call. It's not 24 hours, let me just warn. I know we've had this discussion a little bit recently. That's kind of like a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 type of number. I have this kid, I've been thinking about getting treatment and I'm not sure where they should go. For our programs, you want to call them directly. And those are all the things that they do. They really will guide you in the right direction. All right, so the youth stabilization programs, we're called a bunch of different things. Let me just say that. And the blue paper I passed around suggests that. So depending on the insurance company, we're called all sorts of different things. If a kid needs detox, we take them into detox. If they don't need detox, we still take them. So what a kid might look like who comes to us might be binge drinking every Saturday night to blackout, but only every Saturday night. So there's only use really one time a week. It could be shooting heroin multiple times a day. And it could be like chronic marijuana smoking, which we see a lot of. 13 to really 18, we'll take them if they're 18 years old and they don't have a history of adult treatment. And if they're still enrolled in school, if they're in foster care, if there's a developmental reason why this 18-year-old would be much better suited to adolescent treatment, which is honestly a good bulk of them. So it's really, for those of you who are mental health people, and I know DSM-4 is going away, but we think about the Axis 4 stuff, the different domains where the substance use is affecting their life in order to come in. So for some kids, they could smoke weed every single day after school, and there's not a ton of negative effects that are occurring to them right now imminently. For other kids who are smoking one time a day, perhaps it's making them psychotic. So it's really where this affecting them, their ability to get to school, they're beginning to run into legal, whatever else. Lots of mental health. So if you think about the mental health spectrum with like inpatient psych as the most restrictive, and most of you are probably familiar with CVATs, which is kind of subacute to the inpatient mental health. So we take a similar level of mental health as CVATs. So if they're not actively suicidal and trying to do something right now, or actively homicidal and trying to hurt somebody right now, we'll take them. If they're psychotic because of their drug use, but it's not to the extent, where they couldn't participate in groups and talk to other kids, we'll take them. And that's kind of the theme. If they present to us, we'll find a way to take them, really, honestly. It is not a locked unit, I do want to stress that, but it's secure. So it's similar to the Section 35 programs that exist. You push on a bar, it alarms, there's delays so that staff can kind of respond to the unit. So in that way, it's similar to CVAT too, in terms of like level of care and level of restriction. And this is kind of what you would expect. Our kids stay, our length of stay has gone up a lot over time, I think a lot because of the mental health piece. I'd say really 14 to 21 days for program completion is what we're looking at. It's a good chunk of time. And if they're detoxing, it comes towards that longer end because it really takes them 5 to 7 days to be able to start doing the clinical work, honestly. Individual family group counseling, we have clinicians 7 days a week, 13 hours a day. So they are getting at least an hour clinically, one-on-one, every single day in addition to group. 2 nurses round the clock and direct care staff, things like that. We do provide family education for parents to come in and really get educated about the system. We have multiple languages as well, case management, and every kid completing the program will be with an aftercare plan. So insurance, some of you may know and some of you may not know that there's a law that was passed that mandates insurance companies to pay for substance abuse treatment regardless of prior authorization, which is going into effect on Thursday. We don't really know what it's going to look like. We typically have no problem getting any kid with mass health into our programs. They are amazing, especially MDHP. For an MDHP kid, they don't even require a crisis evaluation. They don't require medical clearance at the ER. You give us a phone call, it's a 5-minute quick screen, bring the kid in. It's immediate access to care. For other mass healths, it's been crisis teams need to see them and get the authorization to come in. And a lot of the private insurances were requiring ER visits to come in. That may start to change after Thursday. I don't know what it will look like because there are some restrictions on those insurance companies, but it's really quite possible that over the next month or so we will see those mandated ER visits for a lot of the private insurance companies, or perhaps even crisis evals disappear for authorization for treatment. So that's physically what they look like. Castle's physically a castle, and there's another one near that's in Worcester. So a couple of things kind of generally. When you're waiting for inpatient psych beds and you're waiting for CVATs, it can often be like days wait, boarding in the emergency room, whatever else. I have 13 kids in treatment in a 24-bed program right now. I have beds, open beds. In the last year, we've had 2 days where we've been full. That's it. So in addition to getting the kids in, our overnight level of care and in our system, the substance abuse specific CBHI, I have immediate openings in this area and kind of all across the Southeast. All of our therapeutic mentors are in recovery themselves. So it's a really awesome dynamic for them working with the kids. High Point also will provide medication-assisted treatment to kids under 18 years old, Suboxone or Vivitrol, the shot that can prevent them from overdosing. And also all of our kids become trained on opioid overdose prevention while they're at the program. So recognizing signs and symptoms, what do? They get educated about the Good Samaritan law, and every kid who wants to can leave with a prescription for Narcan under age 18. So they have to go with a parent, guardian, whatever, to the pharmacy. They bring this script, they fill it. It's only Walgreens that's agreeing to do that for us right now. But we've had no issue filling that Narcan script. They're all taught to use it while they're at Castle as well. And many of them have had it done to them and have used it on other people as well. So Narcan, for those of you who don't know, is it kind of looks like an EpiPen, sort of physically, but it reverses the effects of an overdose. Often it takes multiple doses in order to do that. So we do, we train them, if you've got Narcan and you use it and they're still not waking up, or even if they do, you still need to call 911, they still need to get to the emergency room, things like that. If they call 911 and they show up at their house, unless there is massive illegal activity, like there's bags of drugs everywhere, all over the house with a huge intent to distribute. If there's general paraphernalia or there's general, kind of single-use amounts of substances, that they can't be arrested for calling 911.
Just for clarification, the Narcan only reverses opiate overdoses, not
Yes.
overdose on it.
I've had one of your kids made it to us, I can tell you, that you were talking about last week, which is awesome. But except for that kid, I haven't had a referral from the Fall River greater area for 4 months, which is concerning to me. And I've had 10 to 15 open beds per day during that entire time. So they're not making it to treatment for whatever reason.
So about 3 years ago, I actually had a young man who I sent to Castle. I had a really hard time getting him in because he was only smoking marijuana. And then when he finally did get in, he was the only one in the facility that was there for marijuana. So in his mind, he wasn't like the rest of them, and therefore he just kind of went through what he needed to go through and came out and didn't really take away from the program what he should have. So I'm just wondering if now you see more of the just marijuana.
I think he might have been playing you. So 50% of our kids come in with marijuana as their primary drug of choice. A full 50%. When you look down our census of drugs of choice, it's 50% or more where marijuana is their primary drug. So opiate as their drug of choice, probably only about a third of our kids.
What are you finding for trends as far as opiate use of these kids? What are they reporting?
Say that last part again?
What are they reporting? Like, I'm
Like
finding
when they
some
started
that,
to use and things
yeah,
like
like
that?
I'm finding some that aren't even, it was always pain meds that we were thinking was, the gateway. I'm having kids come in now who haven't even used them. They're just shooting heroin. Like, it's insane. Have
They
you
don't
seen
always
that?
kind of stop at that
Yeah.
middle ground that you would expect. I mean, I think a lot of kids, we do see what you see in the adult system in that kid has a rotator cuff injury, prescribed opiates, moves on to heroin, or starts taking them from their grandmother's cabinet and whatever else. But I think more often what we do see is they're high and drunk at a party, someone says, give this a try, or I thought I was snorting cocaine and it was heroin, I really liked it. So let me give this a shot. But the thing is, it's so cheap. So it's so accessible, particularly this area, North Shore kids. We take kids from all over the state. We've had one kid in my 3.5 years at Castle from Boston that was a heroin addict, one. So that's really, you're seeing a lot more chronic marijuana in general, but Southeast we get a lot, a whole lot. And Weymouth, and a lot from Weymouth as well. But I do want to kind of leave you with, we're sort of one-stop shopping. If the kid's never been in treatment and you don't know what other service they're going to need afterwards, get them in the door. Like, we'll do the education, we'll do the clinical work. A lot of our kids, almost 50% of our kids go to residential treatment. So in terms of barriers to care, the substance abuse system compared to other systems is like awesome. I come from more of the mental health world too. So in order to get a kid into Castle, like you're not going to be boarding a kid for days in the emergency room. A lot of the insurance is it's quick entry. There are sober high schools. There's one in Brockton. And to get a kid into that school, it's like an alternative school. From the first day that you call and saying my kid is interested in going to this school to when they start school is 7 days. And you don't need an IEP, so there's not kind of a block with that. And then the residential program is no state agency involvement. Usually to get a kid in your res, you need DMH, DCF, DYS, right? You don't need any of it. And there are multiple residential programs that we refer kids to. Unfortunately, none of them are in the Southeast, so it does require some travel and whatever else for parents.
Yeah, I would say that's probably been the biggest obstacle with referring out that way is just the transportation to even get a kid there for the first time. That's been the barrier for us all along. A lot is specifically adolescent substance abuse in Fall River because like leaving this, going to Dartmouth is like going to Florida. It really is. And so getting them to Brockton, I think, has always been the bigger challenge for it. But when we get the kids there, I've had wonderful reviews.
And for kids that we know, so if they've been to our treatment program before and they need to go back and transportation is an issue, we've gone out and picked kids up. Only if we know them, because I can't put somebody in a situation that's fair enough. that's not okay, but we've done that a couple of times. Where kids call themselves asking for treatment, we'll go grab them.
Kim, would you talk for just a couple minutes about section 35 process?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So about a quarter to a fifth of our kids are section 35. Does everyone know? Okay. So section 35, you know, we've got like section 12 for site. Everybody's familiar with that. Section 35, it's not, it's a little bit different. It's a civil commitment. So almost always, it looks like a parent or guardian or loved one who's related to that person goes into the court and says, my loved one is at risk to harm themselves or somebody else because of the level of their substance use, and they need to be mandated to treatment because they won't go. So that could be like they're driving under the influence all of the time. They've had several overdoses, things like that. And it's a little bit of a, I think, scary process for a parent the first time because the kid does get brought in. They are cuffed and shackled. They have the evaluation. If they're found to meet the need, they're transported by the sheriff to the program. So High Point has one male facility that's about 100 beds and a female facility that's about 75 beds for adults. The Section 35 kids are in and amongst the other kids, and there's no way you would know the difference. If you worked at the program and you didn't know why they were admitted or how they were admitted, you wouldn't know the difference. And that includes kids for primarily marijuana, actually. If that other safety stuff goes along with it. So I did a little bit of digging with Hillary about Section 35. So Brockton ER has a deal with the courthouse where if they have X amount of overdoses with the same person, they have a half-hour window. So doctor calls, they guarantee that the doctor can come into the courthouse, file the Section 35, and be back to Brockton Hospital within a half an hour. So that's kind of like an internal deal that they've made with the courthouse. Plymouth, Hillary was saying, it's you show up at the ER with your second OD, we're Section 35 and you're in treatment. I'm not going to play the game. So I don't know, I don't know your city and town and what deals could be struck between emergency rooms or whatever else. I think if you've got a 16-year-old who showed up overdosed on your curb, that they kind of got to figure out what they're going to do about it, and if there can be any deals struck that are similar to those other areas that are really struggling.
What is the, oh, I'm sorry.
That's it, go.
What does the aftercare look like? You said that their release was kind of a plan, so what does that look like normally?
So last year we had almost 50% of our kids go to residential treatment. I have very mixed feelings about that personally. I think in a lot of ways it's really great, but at the same time they're coming home to the same family triggers, friends, groups, schools, etc. that really maybe helped them get into this situation. But the residential programs are awesome, that said. And that's one of the reasons we pushed really hard to get substance abuse specific CBHI. That was something we wanted really badly. And a lot more of our kids in the Southeast have left with like Sober High School and CBHI or something like that. We have a couple other cool aftercare things that we do. There's something called Drug Story Theater. It's actually our psychiatrist and medical director runs it, but it's kids who are in early recovery talking about their experience. They work with improv people to write a script and go perform at places. And they get paid for that, so that becomes like their job for doing these performances all over the place. And we do use the Recovery High School a lot. It's a problem. Transportation can become a problem, not so much for the kids on IEPs, as much as the kids who aren't. And but CBHI is frequent for our kids in particular. There's not a lot of like IOP or day program things to refer kids to anywhere, really. Kids don't tend to stay in them, so they can't remain funded, to be honest with you. Everyone sort of tried to do that.
I'm new to this media, but the High Point facility in the New Bedford area does not serve youth. Is that what you're saying?
The outpatient though, outpatient can, but the inpatient facility in New Bedford is
Brockton's
only
the closest.
the Women's Section 35 program.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is there any sharing of services, like across state lines, say between like, particularly for like us living in this area, like Fall River, we're so close to Rhode Island services. And you just mentioned like not a lot of opportunities for IOP and PHP for adolescents in Mass.
We've had a hard time, we've even had parents like private pay from Rhode Island and Connecticut, to be honest with you, for the select few people that have money to do that for $600 a day, but we have not really been able to do that.
So what would be the aftercare plan you would set up for a kid from Fall River, where we don't have a sober high school, we don't have some other?
I mean, it depends what their day structure needs are, you know, if they're gonna be going back to school, or not, then we have to get a little bit more creative with whatever it's gonna be, GED classes, whatever else. Like I said, I have immediate availability through CDHF. And it may mean, you know, if they're on medication-assisted treatment, it may mean that the CDHI crew has to like help get them to their appointments because they're not going to be in Fall River, but we'll make it happen. And we have, including their child shot.
I can talk to that in a couple minutes too.
And just for a little bit of clarification, does everyone know what medication-assisted treatment is? So medication-assisted treatment is literally a medication that helps a person with their opiate addiction. There are a couple others for alcohol, per se. The ones that we have for adolescents for opioid abuse are Vivitrol and Suboxone. Methadone is not approved for under 18. Once an adolescent becomes 18, they become available for methadone. They work in a couple of different ways. They either fill the opioid receptors in the brain or they block the opioid receptors in the brain, depending on the medication that you're talking about. So it does help. I think they said something like 80% of people in long-term recovery were able to achieve it through the assistance of MAT without, you know, instead of just kind of trying to do, you know, the more old-fashioned, you know, just doing counseling, just doing community-based services. That's a huge piece of it. Medication-assisted treatment is considered an adjunct therapy. It's used on top of counseling and on top of other services, but it can really, really help. So.
Just, I wanted to go through a couple of other services that are available, and then we can kind of open it up for other questions you may have. Just take off a little bit on what Cassidy just said. One of the problems that you run into in treating addiction is that because, as I said earlier, the cortex kind of becomes disinvolved while the person is addicted. Unfortunately, it's very necessary to be totally involved for recovery. So you have a problem. On the one hand, you have this intense craving when the person is not using that really, you know, really has mastery for the most part. On the other hand, you really need everything that the cortex, you know, can provide in terms of understanding, you know, how to stay sober, how to get and stay sober. And it's a complicated process. It involves a lot of processing. And that processing, unfortunately, it takes a while to get that processing happening again. People estimate that for an alcoholic, for example, it takes up to a year to restore that cortical functioning. So at the time that they need it most, to most understand what they need to do in order to stay clean and sober, that process is not available. So medication-assisted treatment is really, really helpful in terms of treating the craving so that you can treat the actual addiction with talk therapy. So it's a really nice combination if you can use it and if it's available. Unfortunately, it's not available for all types of addiction, you know, at this point. So, okay, I wanted to go through a couple of other services that are available that will help bridge the gap between services like detox and stabilization and others. So there is this, first of all, there are traditional kind of outpatient services where the adolescent or young adult will come to a mental health clinic and receive substance use disorder services. There's also what the BPA, the Department of Public Health, calls family intervention programs. Those programs are based on a model called ACRO, which stands for Adolescent Community Reinforcement Approach. It's an evidence-based practice that really, what it tries to do, it provides, you know, outpatient therapy, but it's really, there's really a lot of outreach involved. Folks at IHR who do it, you know, kind of joke that they stalk kids. So what they'll do is they'll text kids, we're meeting tomorrow at 12 o'clock at Dunkin' Donuts. You're going to be there? Yes. So 12 o'clock comes, kid's not there. It's 12 o'clock, I'm at Dunkin' Donuts, where are you? And so forth and so on. So they really, adolescents are notoriously difficult to engage and keep engaged in outpatient services. So what the ACRA model allows us to do is to really kind of follow the kid in the community. Meet with the kid anywhere, the home, the street corner, wherever, as I said, Dunkin' Donuts, a restaurant, the school, wherever, a kid can meet, our staff can go and meet with them there. So in addition to the CBHI services that are available through High Point, we have those ACRA-based services here in southeastern Mass in the Fall River, New Bedford area. So at this point, this time we have one clinician who provides those services. But depending on the need, hopefully we can talk to the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services into funding more. That program has been expanded into other parts of the state. It is really an effective way of reaching adolescents, at least those who are willing to become minimally engaged in the treatment process. The other thing about the service that's different is it's really focused on developing community connections. Has anybody seen the TED Talk on addiction, that basically everything we knew about addiction was not true? If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. There's some ways in which it's a little simplistic, but there's a lot of truth in it. And the truth is that the addiction is not in the drugs, in the substances. The addiction is in us. And it's either in us through genetics, or more likely epigenetics, which is how those genes are expressed in the environment. But it's lack of connection that provides trauma, the lack of connection to parents, lack of connection to community, that really provides the fuel that drives addiction. So that, his thesis, the guy who gave the talk, his thesis is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. So, that's one thing that ACRA really tries to focus on, getting kids reconnected to the community. That involves teaching them drug refusal skills, that involves doing this inventory of community-based activities that kids might like to do but have never been involved in. There's a list of, covering practically a dozen sheets of paper on all the possible activities adolescents could get involved in the community that might be useful in building up their self-esteem, building up their sense of mastery and their sense of competence. So it's really kind of exciting. It's a short-term program, theoretically. There are 12 to 14 sessions of ACRA and the same number for assertive continuing care, which is the case management part of the service. But we've had kids on our caseloads as long as 2 years, depending upon what their needs are. So there's a lot of flexibility on that. It's funded by the Department of Public Health. So it's a great potential service that is available. Unlike a lot of the other services, it is available in Fall River and New Bedford. Institute for Health and Recovery, that's us. We provide it in the Boston area, in parts of Middlesex County, the Northeast and the Southeast. Luck Crisis Centers, which provide it in Worcester and Fitchburg areas. Phoenix House, which provides it in the Springfield area. And North Suffolk, which provides it in the Chelsea, Revere, East Boston area.
We do a lot of referring to that service, especially for kids who are privately insured and do not qualify for any other community-based service. That's been kind of obviously like a really difficult aftercare plan scenario, because all they can do is office-based outpatient or residential. There's really nothing in between, and ACRA's kind of saved us, I think, with a lot of those kids in particular.
So very briefly, I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on this. The Adolescent Residential Treatment System, which involves a voluntary group home model, that there's 15 beds per program. There are, again, like these detox stabilization programs, there's frequently no waiting list, although it's getting to be less the case because we're kind of down one program now. But in general, there's not a long waiting list for these programs. And there is excess capacity. They're like STAR programs in many respects. They provide individualized treatment plans for youth. They're highly structured, developmentally appropriate. There is an in-house educational coordinator that kind of monitors where the kids are at. They have some ability to serve kids on IEPs. They have structured recreational activities. They have a lot of community involvement. They have a lot of in-house group activities that are based around recovery and focused on recovery. There is family therapy available. There is case management and aftercare planning. And the greatest part is that the Bureau of Substance Use Services pays for the lion's share of the service. It's not, the kids don't have to be in DCF custody, as Kim said. They don't have to be in DYS. Kids can, from the community, can go if they need the service and meet the criteria. And it's a sliding scale between the parents and the Department of Public Health, but I've never seen a kid, kids don't get turned away if the parent can't pay. So it's really based on what the parent can pay, and EPH picks up the rest. Okay? And these are the female residential programs, Grace House, Highland Grace House, which is in Worcester, Leahy Adolescent Program, which is in Danvers, and Phoenix House, which is in Springfield. We also have young adult programs as well, which we really don't have time to cover right now. But I do want to cover the recovery high schools. People know that there are recovery high schools, right? Okay, absolutely. We have 5 recovery high schools in the state. They're fully accredited public schools. Students are all in recovery, in various stages of recovery, or thinking about recovery. I mean, some of them operate more on a harm reduction model than on an absence model, but the kids have regular high school classes. They can handle IEPs if the kid's on an IEP. There is mandatory drug testing in each of the programs. Again, and like the residential programs, there's really a lot of focus on recovery. There are recovery groups that happen at the schools, and there's a lot of involvement in the community and recovery groups in the community. So it's really a high school with a strong recovery focus. The recovery high schools are Ostagon, which is in Boston, North Shore Recovery High School, which is in Beverly, Liberty Prep, which is in Brockton, which is in Springfield, Independence Academy, which is in Brockton, and finally we have a brand new recovery high school, which is in Worcester. It's run by the Central Mass Education Collaborative. It's just opened this month. Okay.
What's the number of those high schools that how many kids in each?
Kids are there. It's really small. They're anywhere from 15 to 50 kids.
Brockton has 13 currently.
Yeah, and that's pretty low. I mean, they really to function well, you need really around somewhere between 20 and 50. But there's obviously a lot of individualized attention.
One of the good things about the recovery high school too is, like, working in substance abuse, we can't share somebody's tox screen results. The same confidentiality that exists for adult programs exists for kid programs. There's no differentiation in the law for us. But the recovery high school is not a treatment facility. So when they do tox screens, they say to the kid, like, you can tell your mom, or I'm going to tell your mom. Which is really it's a lot of assurance for family and providers and DCF and whomever else. We don't really have another vehicle to test a kid on a regular basis.
Are these part of the public high school systems? Like how those?
They are part of the public school system. Now, in some cases, they are housed or identified as alternative schools, but they are part of the public school system. So the kid who goes there gets their diploma from the towns which that school is.
All they need is a substance abuse diagnosis somewhere on some clinical something. That's it, literally.
So they'd have to live in one of those cities.
No, not necessarily. There are a lot of kids who go to, for example, the closest one to you guys is Independence Academy. There are a lot of kids who come from all over. They will, transportation can be a barrier. Okay, I'll put that right out there. On the other hand, they really will do whatever they can to address it. They will send buses around to to T stops or commuter rail stops to pick up kids. They'll do whatever they can to work with the parents to try to minimize that transportation barrier.
They currently have a kid from New Bedford and a kid from Lakeville.
And how are they getting him? I mean, there's no transportation agreements, you know?
The Lakeville kid, his mom drops him off at the Middleborough train station, which is costly, and that kid's family can actually afford it. New Bedford, the kid's on 90.
So we get transportation?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
And why would you not choose this area to open up one of those high schools? Like, we already have a resiliency high school, so we are in desperate need of this care. So how do you choose where you're gonna go?
You know what, they would keep opening up more and more and more if they were well attended. So Osterguy does pretty well, North Shore Recovery High does pretty well. Brockton, the highest amount of kids they've had, I think is 16 with a capacity for like 50 or 60. So if they were meeting capacity, I think they would gladly open more and have the funding to open more. But the one in Brockton in particular is in danger. They've cut an immense amount of staff because they can't get kids in the door. It's scary.
Yeah, they're looking to move, so
Yes.
you can put in a pitch.
Yeah, I think
They
we
should move
should.
to Fall River.
Or at least a little more central.
Any other questions?
The ARC, or is that what it's called? AFRA? What is the referral process? So say I have a kid in the emergency room who comes in who, I refer to the community support program, which sounds similar to this for adults. How would I refer this child? I know,
Call the number that's right on the screen right there.
and then that starts the process.
That will start the process. I mean, I actually in the car probably have a referral, I have a referral form, so if you want to, if you guys can hang around for a couple minutes, I can run to the car and pick them up. But if you call that number, that will get the process started.
Is that number on any of these things that you've given us? Or?
So I just handed out a couple of things. One looks like this, the VSAS substance abuse service directory, and I believe it's on the second page.
Okay.
This is the brand spanking new.
Fresh, hot off the presses.
Hot off the presses, so I'm not exactly sure where it's located, but it's usually right around the second page.
It's on this one.
And it's also, okay, so the other thing that I handed out is an adolescent service guide that was created here in the Southeast by the Family Recovery Council. It's the very first number on the very first page there. So you're getting it in a lot of different formats because that's the central intake line. If you want most adolescent substance abuse services in Mass, that's the number. If you're trying to get to Castle, you can contact Castle directly at, what's the number?
It's on your blue sheet and on the pamphlet.
It's in the book also, right?
Yes.
Yes, yep.
Yes,
Would you be able to share this slideshow with Annemarie or myself?
Yes.
And if you want to email the referral form as well, I can blast it out to this group.
sounds good.
Thank you.
I'll do it.
And I have a couple of questions for the group. The first is for the nurses in the room. Are you guys doing SBIRT screening for substance abuse here in Fall River? Okay, so SBIRT is screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. I know I don't want to say most, many schools in Massachusetts have started this through the nursing.
I think we're looking at it.
You're looking at it,
I
okay.
can take any paperwork or any to my boss.
All right, wonderful. I just had a call with Jim Hyatt from VSAS Adolescent Services, and that's something they're looking to get going statewide. So yeah, I'll definitely get you some information on that.
Okay.
So the three resources you have are a quick guide, a complete guide, and the Adolescent Services Directory. I didn't duplicate all the substance abuse services in the adolescent little white pages that you got because they're all here. But those are ancillary services we have, mentors, boys and girls clubs, recreation, everybody's in there. So that's a wonderful way to kind of get folks going in a good direction. There's also, and I just found this out yesterday, the House is in the process of passing, probably this week, a supplemental budget closing out the June 30th state fiscal year. And there's $3.8 million for DESE municipal grants for mental health and substance abuse counseling in schools. So this is new funds that should be available soon for services in the school, which is really, really important because we know when you try to do an IOP, when you try to do outpatient, where adolescents have to find their way and make their way to services, they don't go. There's a huge attrition rate. And so the programs that offer these services shut them down because they can't keep them going because they can't get them there. But if we can get it in the schools during, times and locations that work for the students, and for the school, obviously, that, can be a tremendous help. So we'll be looking to hear more about that within the next week or so. So I just had a question about drug story theaters. So if these are young people who are in recovery, sharing their stories of recovery, and they go around and they talk about their experiences. And it's a wonderful thing for young people to hear. This isn't just a problem of, adults, or this could never happen to me. That's sort of the adolescent invincibility that, is wonderful and terrible about this age group. But drug story theater is a really wonderful way to tap into that. These are young people just like me. Can you tell us just a tiny bit more about that, Kim, and if that's available in this area?
So it's this year it's going to be held at Massasoit. Before it was in Plymouth, and nobody could get through, to be honest. Massasoit makes it a little bit more, I think, reachable, to be honest. But we have kids coming from Boston, Plymouth, New Bedford, like really, truly all over. So it's our medical director got like an earmark amount of money from the Department of Public Health to get it started and give it a shot. Currently, all of the kids have come from Castle at some point or another. It doesn't mean that they just got out. And a lot of the kids in the recovery high school are going too. But our psychiatrist runs sort of two different parts of that. So the kids are having a lot of, like I said, improv teaching and all that, but they're having like a really therapeutic experience. At the same time, many of their parents we've been able to get there. And they're doing kind of groups with Dr. Schrand and the other professionals that he has working there. And the parents participated in drug story theater, and which has been really, really awesome, actually. And they can tell their experience from their perspective and what it was like to worry about their kid and all that other stuff.
Did you go to the performance? Were you there? Has it already happened?
There was one last fall, and then there's one in Marsfield on Tuesday evening at 7, which is the old crew. And then there's a bunch of kids. It's starting again next week with adding more kids for the year. So they're getting paid for their performances, and then a bulk of it, it's something like 75% of it is going to an educational fund for them to use.
They don't travel.
In terms of like where they do the rehearsals, no. Like the schools, like if you guys were open to having the troupe come to your school, absolutely 100% they'll come to your school.
Oh, they will, great.
Yeah, he uses kind of like a permission slip for each kid for school, like can this kid leave this school day for this reason to go do this performance at this school or wherever.
And won't we have to provide transportation, or is that something that's included in the?
We try to get creative.
Okay.
Again, having some kind of wraparound services involved with it certainly helps.
Yeah.
Some of the kids are driving on their own right now, which is great. So being in Brockton, I think will be a little bit better than Plymouth, at least, because there was no public transportation anywhere or anything. But having wraparound services would be ideal to get them there.
So if your school is interested, they can contact you or contact?
You can go ahead and contact me, that's fine. I hopefully have some cards with me. And I can email the flyer to you maybe and get it distributed to everybody, both for kids to participate in it, but also to have it. Middle schools, I think, is actually probably the target audience almost more than high schools, as the kids are dipping into it. Most of our kids are starting at 10, 11, 12 when we're doing assessments.
I can understand you trying to nip it in the bud in those middle schools and high schools, but I think there's also a need like for a 2-year BCC program. I see a lot of problems between that 18-year-old and the 30-year-old.
Sure.
So and these guys are getting these younger kids are getting the help more so.
When you walk through the Section 35 programs, the men's program is right next to Castle. It looks like you're walking into college with the age group. Absolutely. Yep.
And the last thing I had is we're going to be having a community forum meeting about this topic and bringing all the resources together so we can determine what gaps continue to exist in our community and how we can sort of rally the troops and get those gaps filled, whether it's services in the schools or whether it's prevention. And those are 2 areas that I know Fall River's been looking to beef up a little bit. So we're going to be talking about that on October 19th from 1 to 3 p.m. at DCF in New Bedford, which is 98 North Front Street. And if you're interested in attending that meeting, everybody's welcome. I can get you my card and we'll get you on my list. Obviously, this is, you know, if one child dies, it's too many. So, you know, anything we can do as a community to rally behind this and get folks what they need, whether it's prevention or treatment resources, we're happy to help. So I'll distribute my cards, and we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, Michael.